I think time travel is possible. Think of a day when you can freely travel the streets of your own city, coming from one century to another. The same is possible in Ukraine, but not all periods are beautiful. And today I want to take you on a tour that I have called Chasing Sovok. Sovok is a slang word that we use to describe the period of Soviet occupation, and it left many scars, both in our hearts and on our streets. We are in my native city Lutsk, which is in the western part of Ukraine. And behind me is a building that is supposed to be one of the most romantic places, because this is the building where people get married and divorce. It has a weird Soviet name, RATS, which stands for the abbreviation Registration of Acts of Civil Status or something. But what we are looking at right now is the beautiful architectural style so typical for the 70s and 80s in the Soviet Union. Many similar buildings still stand in other cities of post-Soviet territory. Maybe I am subjective. Let me know in the comments what impressions this construction give you. We are standing on the bridge that connects two parts of my city, Lutsk. The bridge goes above the railway station. That's why the district behind me is known as the railway district. Don't worry, we are not going to show you some strategic places, but we are going to introduce you to one of the locations that was born back in the 50s during Khrushchev times. Behind me there are lots of houses known as Khrushchevkas. We have a separate video with the inside tour, but I believe it's important to see how they looked in this urban environment. And once again, they prove that urban planning was definitely not the feature of the USSR. They were constructed here in Lutsk back in the 60s, and the first Khrushchevka in Ukraine appeared in 1957 in Kyiv. They were constructed quickly without any respect to space that people need or any special comfort. They were meant to stand 30-50 years and disappear, but they are still standing, reminding us about the times of Khrushchev. Honestly, I do understand that many people who came to live in the cities needed the places where to live. But from the other point of view, we see how little attention was paid to the comfort and beauty of Soviet streets. I know that in many countries that were once occupied by Soviet Union, you also have huge districts of Khrushchevka. Let me know in comments, what do you do with them? How do you reconstruct or do you destroy them? Because this is the plan we will need after we win this war with Russia. What is wrong behind me? Well, of course, the style and the general look of Khrushchevka, but also how closely it is connected to the bridge. When you open your windows, what do you breathe? Emissions. Health and comfort was never a priority for Soviet constructors. When I was asking people who live in Lutsk what is the most Soviet place for them, many named the shop behind me. It keeps the atmosphere of the end of Soviet Union, 80s, 90s. Look at the doors, look at the windows, it's all very typical. And when I was a child going to school, this shop already existed. It has a weird name of a Greek god, Hermes, but you can buy different products in a very Soviet environment. And actually I'm very nervous to enter it because Soviet time shop assistants were very aggressive, and I don't know, maybe they are the same in the shop even now. Guys, actually I was right, and they turned out to be pretty aggressive, so we are not able to film inside. But believe me, the atmosphere is very Soviet, and now even more Soviet than before. I don't know know how about you, but for me it is really interesting. It resembles time travel, and many of these objects that are extremely Soviet in their style I do not notice in my everyday life passing by. Behind me is an bus station that was built back in Soviet times, and it connected some minor routes to the villages around Lutsk, and it looks very traditional for that period. Everything is very traditional for the 70s approximately. Look at this white decorations. I don't know what is the English for the pavements, this parts of the pavements that are painted white, but that is typical for the Soviet era, and in many villages and cities of Ukraine people continue doing that every spring. They believe spring will not come if you do not renew this white paint. Look at garbage bins, also very traditional for the Soviet era, and same as the letters in which you can read the name of my city, Lutsk. Oh, I had time and I looked it up in a dictionary. The name for this thing is border, and it's white. It's always white. And I feel like inside a Soviet movie because, come on, look, it is extremely typical for that period. Maybe we can try and go inside. I'm asking you, please subscribe to our channel, Anna from Ukraine, to follow the updates on Russian war in Ukraine and also to learn more about history of Ukraine, including the Soviet period. By the way, out of the topic, but everywhere in Ukraine you can find posters like that invite people to the Ukrainian armed forces, because as the war continues, we still need lots of people and lots of weapons to win this war. And now we have come to another district of my city that appeared during the Soviet era, and it has a very funny name, Sugar District. Do you know why? Not because it is a sweet place, but because of sugar plant that is located here. And actually all the buildings, houses and schools appeared later after the installment of the plant. I was born right before the collapse of Soviet Union, but I can still remember its atmosphere. Why? Because every evil empire dies for a certain period of time, and actually I believe that USSR is still dying in Putin's head, in his desire to renovate this awful monster. But if you'd ask me what is a classical picture of the dying Sovok, that would definitely be behind me. You can see the plant, you can see a destroyed fountain, and in general everything looks grey, sad and Soviet. How would I describe the Soviet style? Well, first of all, it's absence of style, and I do agree with many of my subscribers who say that environment influences the way we feel, the way we live. And Soviet Union managed to create a very depressive environment for millions of its inhabitants who were actually occupied by this greyness and sadness. No style, no respect for human space, for possibility to observe something beautiful. Districts that appeared around the plants, and no one cared if you had enough space, if you had enough light or whatever. You had to work, work and die. I think with our today's excursion, chasing Sovok, chasing leftovers of Soviet Union in my native city, I've managed to persuade you that to some extent time travel is possible. But I want to say that time travel is not always the best option, especially if you don't want to return to certain periods. And I would not like to return to the period of Soviet Union. My name is Anna and I'm from Ukraine, and I want to be your guide to different periods of our history, because we have to know it well to be able to build our future. If you want to know more about Ukraine, Russian war in Ukraine and our Soviet past, subscribe.